I see. I had muted myself. Good afternoon and good day, everyone. Welcome and thanks for joining us at the 16th ARIJ Forum. And welcome also to all of you joining us online. You're joining the session, Challenging Misinformation, Finding a Way Forward. My name is Nicholas Benaquista, and I'm the Senior Director from the Center for International Media Assistance at the National Endowment for Democracy in Washington, D.C. I'm grateful to have the opportunity to moderate this excellent session today. We have an intellectual powerhouse of a panel here to talk about the challenges of misinformation, so you'll forgive me if I open with a couple of slightly academic remarks. I've been really inspired over the years by a scholar, a theorist, a British theorist named Roger Silverstone, and he has written about news media, mass news media as a gathering place, and has emphasized how important it is for people to come together, particularly in moments of crisis, like the one we're experiencing now here in this region. In moments of crisis when we're most anxious, the importance of gathering the news space is a place that we come together and where we make meaning. And what Silverstone, I think, has emphasized in his theories and in his way of thinking about the media as a gathering place is that process of meaning making is social. It's not to say that we all come away from it having the same conclusions and having determined the same meaning from an event, but that process brings us together. It should bring us together. And in fact, I think when we think about the information disorder, lies and mistruths, malinformation, misinformation, disinformation, whatever you want to call it, one of the reasons I think it's the defining challenge of our times is because it is so deeply intertwined with our social fabric, and it really threatens the social fabric of our communities and of whatever is left of the global public sphere. So we're, today I think gathered to look at the way forward. I think we may still want to add a question mark to the title of that, and I'm hoping today we'll hear from our panelists about what it is that we think we know now about the information disorder, if we are moving beyond the stage of just trying to understand what is happening in the information space, and to what degree we are beginning to see a path forward towards a healthy information space, see beyond the confusion and the chaos of our information space into something that brings us together once again. So with that, I'm very pleased to introduce Khaled Mansour to my left, a journalist, a writer, the former director of the Egyptian Initiative for Personal Rights, also currently a member of Meta's Oversight Board. To his left, Dr. Arwa Kouli, journalist, an assistant professor at the Institute of Press and Information Sciences in Tunisia, and also presently leading with AFCN network some research looking at mis and disinformation, looking at information disorder. To her left, Peter Cunliffe-Jones, founder of Africa Check and a visiting researcher at the University of Westminster in London. And finally, Dr. Herman Wasserman, a professor at Stellenbosch University in South Africa, who is also currently leading a really fascinating new research network of which Dr. Kouli is a part, looking at the information disorder purely from the perspective of the Global South. So look, we've got a terrific panel and we've got limited time. So with that, I'd like to start with Peter. Peter courageously volunteered to kick us off today with a 2-minute definition of what the information disorder is. So how should we understand this current moment of disorder?
The word courageously is doing quite a lot of work there. Okay, so I have a problem with the framing of information disorder. And maybe it's being too pedantic about the semantics of it. But if you think of a disorder, the word disorder, you think of a medical disorder, economic disorder, political disorder. it's a disruption or dysfunction in a system, an overall system in your medical, in the body, whatever sphere it is, that causes a problematic outcome. And from the work that Africa Check has done for the last 11 plus years, we started out thinking that the problem was what we now call mis and disinformation. The problem was the problematic information. But when you look at what is contributing to people's lack of understanding about the world around them, I think there are three things that come out very strongly. I think they come out more strongly in parts of the global south than in the parts of the global north, and that's perhaps the definition that we all use comes from a very good friend working in the global north. So the three things I see problematic information, so false and misleading information, whether you wish to call it mis and disinformation, malinformation, whatever you want to call it. So problematic information is part of the reason that we don't understand the world around us. Lack of access to accurate information can also deny us the information that the way we should understand our world. There are many countries in which the citizens of that country do not have access to information that they need in order to understand the world around them. And the third part is distortion in the focus of information that we see. So the example I give to a British audience is if you read the Daily Mail, you will see stories that each in and of themselves are accurate, but give you a distorted understanding of the role of immigrants in the country.
Right.
So false information, lack of access, and distortions in the information that we have access to.
That's terrific, Peter. Thanks. That's really helpful place to start.
And 2 minutes.
And exactly 2 minutes. Yeah, well done. Well done indeed. Arwa, does that trilogy, that set of kind of that typology that he's outlined, does that resonate in your work and with what you see in the MENA region? And I was hoping you could sort of comment on the theory of it, but also for the audience here, say a couple of words about whether the information disorder has some unique characteristics in the MENA region that set it apart.
شكراً على هذا السؤال. أنا كنت ناقشت
Thank you for this information. I discussed with Peter about this change. There's a lot of problematic about thinking, about theoretical thinking and implementation, about scientific research. But regarding the concept of the Arab region and the MENA region, to how innocent there's a difference, I think the matter of misinformation is always been persistent ever since the humanity started. But there's a specificity for this region connected to that. We know this type of information is spread widely during crisis and wars. This is an area that is going through these crises. If it's not bloody and killing and political conflicts, change of systems, this stability, this all promotes this kind of misinformation. The other point is, if we take the example, the war on Gaza, thinking from the point of view of الجنوب الكرة الأرضية ومن النظر العربية، أين تنتشر هذه النوعية؟ Where does it go on social media? So this opened the space for widespread. If you are distributing in a censored space, you wouldn't be expressed or present your own side of the story. It could be only one story, and sometimes it's not accurate and untrue. So this is a specificity about this conflict, and this promotes the distribution of this kind of information. I think it's connected to the inner concepts. I will add another point. It's connected to the availability of information. Peter already mentioned that when you are living in a space where there's a lack of information and they are restricting the access of journalists to information. This is increasing during the recent years. When you are asking information, official information, you don't get it. This makes the situation really complicated in this area.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Arwa. Yeah, you highlight a really important point, which others have made previously in this conference. If we can't guarantee the safety of journalists, if we can't guarantee freedom of expression, the gap, the void that leaves is nowadays frequently filled with mis and disinformation. Absolutely. Herman, you are leading this research project, and I've heard you speak about mis and disinformation, about the information disorder in the past, and really taking a historical perspective on it, which I think is much needed and often not part of the conversation about this. So what does the past tell us about the way forward in this present moment?
Thanks. I think there are certainly elements that are new. So I don't think it is entirely a long historical problem. But I think for us to understand, sorry, can you hear me? Shall I start again? So maybe I'll say disinformation, I won't say it's not completely new. I think certain elements of it, the size, the scope, and the speed of disinformation, the fact that it's facilitated by digital and social media, the ability to amplify disinformation globally, those aspects I think are new. But I think, especially if we look at the global south, disinformation often has its roots in much older networks of power and social and cultural dynamics. What communities or societies in the global south share is experience of colonialism, marginalization, authoritarian governments, big social inequalities, ethnic tensions, racism, gender disparities that have been exploited over the years and continue to provide a foothold for disinformation. So when we look at the way that disinformation latches onto these aspects, those inequalities, those marginalization, etc., often have long historical roots, and we have to understand those roots in order to understand how they're being exploited currently through disinformation. Another aspect, I think, which is relevant in the global south is that the region has also had a long experience of authoritarian and state control over information, propaganda, political falsehoods. Those are sometimes domestic, but throughout history they've also been imposed through colonial governments, for instance, and also in the post-colonial era. And what that has done is that it has bred distrust in official narratives. It has often bred distrust also in journalism or in the media, because media often have been state-owned in some of those regions. And what it's given rise to is often alternative networks for like gossip, satire, jokes, that have been playing quite a progressive role in sometimes over history, but now has also given a foothold for disinformation to use those same strategies. So I think if we want to understand why disinformation has purchase in the global south and how it works and how it operates, we have to understand that longer history, those deeper social factors, and some of them persist and continue to persist and provide fertile ground for disinformation to flourish.
Thanks a lot, Herman. I think that's really helpful, and I think we are actually foregrounding all of the social drivers of misinformation in this kind of opening set of questions. But there's one that we're missing, which has been the kind of the economic drivers. So this has worked out very well, because there are folks who do argue that in addition to everything we've talked about, that simply the way the internet is now organized in a commercial fashion, that the platforms that dominate our online lives and their way of making money, what Dr. Zuboff calls surveillance capitalism, is always going to give a preferential treatment to mis and disinformation. Others point to kind of the Disinformation Inc., a growing industry of actors who are working in a coordinated fashion to provide disinformation for profit. But what's your view on the economic drivers of this?
شكرا نيك. أنا يعني فشلنا في التنوع الجندري.
Thank you, Nick. I'll try to maintain the lingual diversity. I will try to speak in English, in Arabic.
مساواة التنوع الجندري. لكن في الحقيقة إنه من الخطل إن إحنا
because of course it's risky not to talk about capitalism. Censorship is sometimes something ordinary. We have around 6 trillions of, social media accounts. We cannot really say that internet has become commercialized because since the very beginning, it has been manipulated or controlled by companies which have made gains according to rules. Regarding censorship, what's happening in this regard? Well, we can tackle several examples, such as the targeted advertisements with the purpose of making profit. Well, they are guided, they are oriented, which means that they need information. So this means that your location can be seen thanks to your mobile. And if you are, for instance, near some restaurant, you will see advertisements about, such a restaurant. So what's the connection? Sometimes if we are fat and we change our settings, we will see advertisements related to our interests, to our, history of navigation. Of course, such information and data can be sold to governments. Regarding misinformation, when algorithms that are creating and guiding such advertisements, this is what make them go after, or follow misinformation, which becomes viral. Just let me give you an example. One research company could follow the 10 most famous tweeters with the maximum number of tweets about the war on Gaza. Well, just 30 tweets had around 32 million views, which led to 200 advertisements related to the 30 tweets regarding, even made by some non-profit organizations, in addition to major brands, Twitter, etc., etc. Who are owned by Elon Musk. So in such a case, profits would be divided between the company X, in such a case, and the owner of misinformation, who will be encouraged to act so further. Of course, misinformation contains lots of black and white things, and this is why they may go viral more easily. So mis or disinformation by its nature can be spread using the virus way.
Thanks, Khalid. And I think there is you raise, I think, an important point related to freedom of speech not equating to freedom of reach, something that Peter Pomerantsev has said oftentimes. So people have a right to be wrong. They don't have a right to coordinate and orchestrate a campaign of lies and expect to have those messages broadcast through the system. So clamping down on that kind of coordinated, inauthentic behavior, as the platforms like to call it, rather than taking steps that might impinge on freedom of speech. To try to get a little more concrete, I think there seem to be a few types of interventions highlighted in some of the research reports that we're relying on now to deal with the information disorder. Those tend to be media literacy, trying to educate folks on how to discern fact from fiction, regulation, and that can be regulation focused on the platforms or on corporate and institutional policies, self-regulation, and then of course supply side strategies, which is fact-checking, journalism, providing quality information. I think it's what most of us in this room are engaged in. So let's focus on those four categories for a moment. Herman, you've been looking at kind of trying to understand the public, and their view on these issues. Does the public generally want trustworthy news? And even if they do want it, can they find it? What's your view on the public's role?
I think there's sometimes a danger when we work in this space that one tends to look down upon the public, and so just educate them, give them sort of more information. I don't think all people have a need for information and information that is relevant to their lives. I don't think anybody has an appetite for disinformation as such. Nobody, I think, really enjoys being lied to. The question, I think, what we have to ask, and since we're also talking about journalism, is what does disinformation give people that journalism and reliable journalism doesn't, or that they think it doesn't? Is it news or information that engages them, that resonates with their everyday lives, that speaks their language, that assuages their fears and anxieties? So I think there's, in the first instance, also a challenge for the purveyors of good information, of investigative journalism, and those other forms of journalism, to also think about how do you speak to audiences, how do you engage them, how do you listen to them and find out what it is that makes them anxious and worried, and the sort of things that disinformation latches onto. I think media literacy is very important. We need more research about what types of media literacy works and what doesn't. I think we also need more research on what some of the downsides might be of media literacy. Some of the research I've been involved with, coincidentally with Africa Check in South Africa, suggested that young people have sometimes been made so hyper aware of the danger of disinformation, or the danger of being online, that they have become cynical or paralyzed, even almost sort of overwhelmed. And I think we have to be careful of sort of top-down approaches to media literacy.
Absolutely. Those last 10 minutes have gone by very quickly, so we're running short on time. Peter, the role of the state. Does the state have a role in using regulation to clamp down on the information disorder?
Okay, so three things, because I always believe in three things. So one, I think it's always problematic when states legislate about in ways that enable the state to intervene about specific pieces of content. Because we've seen in many places this just involves the locking up of journalists, the locking up of opposition politicians, and so on. So there are parts of the world where there are systems being brought in. The EU is the obvious one, bringing in the DSA, that requires media, requires platforms to have systems in place to ensure standards. That's a legitimate role, I think, requiring systems to be in place that is not content specific. The second part of it is that the state has to get its own house in order. There are very few parliaments around the world where people who lie in parliament are regulated, are in any way required to correct what they say. It has to be corrected if it's in the media. It doesn't have to be corrected if it's in parliament. If they want to legislate about it, they could legislate themselves. And the third point is about if information disorder is wider than just misinformation, states need to provide the public with access to accurate information about the key things that matter in society. They don't.
Right. Excellent. Thanks, Peter. If I could just ask the organizers, if we could go over by 2 minutes, that would be great. That way, our last two panelists will have a chance to give a final word. Your comments, Peter, are a great segue to Khalid, the question for Khalid. The oversight board at Meta, I'm sure many of you are familiar, is perhaps one of the great successes of self-regulation in the industry. But that being said, people are growing fairly skeptical about self-regulation. So is there still a role for self-regulation in your view?
Of course, trying to fix the information world disorder in 40 minutes is a tall order. هناك 35 مليون قرار محتوى
there are 30 on a daily basis 35 millions regarding contents are taken by Meta regarding Facebook and Instagram accounts regarding claims, etc. Well, the board is our board is receiving around 1,000 claims and complaints on a daily basis. However, we are being able to tackle 5 only per month. And I think the Oversight Council is making systemic recommendations regarding the policy of the content management, because we are not a court, we're not in a trial. One of the major achievements is to start changing, for instance, the terror fighting against terror policies, and which, is held responsible, mostly responsible of the removal of many of the contents. The same applies to hate speech, etc., etc. This is why I think we can only succeed, or this council will succeed only if its mission, for instance, is widened. Two, if other companies are on board, for instance, if especially that YouTube and others are relying on trust and safety. So this is why Meta feels that it's making sacrifices. And third, we need global guidelines, regulations made by the UN or other entities which can subject companies to fines. And I think that this would be much more powerful.
Perfect. I think Peter and Khalid, I think together highlight co-regulation as perhaps the way forward. So we've made some progress today. Arwa, if you could have the last word. As I said, I think most of the folks in this room are looking to supply quality information as the answer to the information disorder. What advice do you have for those of us who are fact checkers and journalists and think tanks trying to fill the world with, if not true information, at least truthful information?
لا أعرف إن كان لدي نصيحة، ولكن ما أؤمن به إنه لن يأتي يوم.
Well, rather than advice, I'm not, totally pessimistic, but I think we won't witness the post-misinformation world. However, all what has been proposed, I think that it really contribute or constitute an exhaustive approach. However, it cannot be by itself a solution. Regarding journalism or fact-checking, I think that this is a main element, special when providing high-quality information, thanks to journalists and fact-checkers. What we need for this purpose is the support, especially in the South or in conflicts affected areas or areas that are witnessing challenges. Of course, because unfortunately there are so many challenges being faced by fact checkers, the lack of funding. Most of them are actually working on a voluntary basis. In order to be able to face misinformation, we should be powerful, we should be strong, and I think that this is my last idea to be conveyed.
We do. I think we need to meet the scale of the challenge with an equal scale. And we're not doing that yet, but hopefully with ARIJ's convening power, we can work together to do that. So thanks very much to our excellent panelists. Thanks for letting us go over time, and enjoy the rest of your conference. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
The organizers are in control.
If I'm told, we went over time, unfortunately, but if I'm told that we can have 5 minutes for questions and answer, well, I'm sure we'd love to take them. I should have my ear set in so that I can get the answer. But yeah.
Instructions,
Unless you tell me to stop, I'll just carry on for 5 more minutes then. Why don't you stand up and you can take the microphone. The woman in the front, followed by the gentleman behind her.
ربيع عيد صحفي فلسطيني.
I'm a Palestinian journalist. I have an intervention about the recent events in Gaza and the journalist coverage. especially in the central international media foundations, they play a role in making the fact-checking plan. But what I see that we have teams of fact-checking are making mistakes and they are fabricating. But apparently, there's something else is going on in these days in journalism. There are basics in journalism. We are not present in the coverage in Gaza. The question is, and about coverage also, the whole concept, the misinformation, there's an absence of approach and context in Gaza now. The question is, this is the new thing going on in media foundation, that they are distributing misinformation and not checked information. I think this is a new phenomena. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll take one more question, and please go ahead. And then I think we'll give the panel 30 seconds to answer, and then we'll have to conclude. But we'll carry on the conversation in the break, please. I think we've run out of time, unfortunately. Please go ahead.
يعطيكم العافية الدكتورة مارسيل جوينات من جامعة
Dr. Marcel from Yarmouk University. The question is, I teach media and journalism. Which is more dangerous? Is the misinformation or how to give accurate information for the media, for the population? Where are we now from the academia of media in the Arabic world?
The translation was working, but Arwa, did you want to take the first question?
نعم. Yeah, I'll take that. أعتقد أنه تم إثارة.
I think there's a very important point has been told. When the media foundations they have a code of standard and respect the journalism work, they should be part of they can be part of misinformation. It's very bad and tragic, and I can't find the word to describe. I think media foundations or companies, even if they don't have to check what they publish, they have to commit to specific standards when they are the source of this information. This is very bad. Very bad for the environment of information. They will lose their credibility about what's going on. It's really important that media foundations hold on to their standards. They shouldn't adopt a specific story. They have to check the information before they distribute, and they shouldn't be a part of the conflict as well.
Khalid, do you want to take the second question?
طبعا متفق معك.
Yes, I completely agree with you. There's a need to repeat the ethic of the work of journalism. There are specific professional codes. I will go back to what Herman said and others, that there's a need for a reader that can actually check the facts and knows why a specific organization are describing the situation in this way. So there's all journalists, newspapers have affiliations, but we hope that the readers can understand the affiliations and analyze according to that. It's been professional, and now the lack of professionalism, it's really hard to have an impartial journalism nowadays. Does not justify the distribution of misleading information. It's a gray zone here. It's a misleading information, that's true. There are affiliations.
Look, as you say, the defining challenge of our time cannot be addressed in 40 minutes. I think that we can all agree upon. So let's continue to this conversation and further conversations today, and let's give our panelists a round of applause, please. Thanks.
Thank you.